So dear friends, we are almost in the month of March. You know that Julius Caesar's famous book by Shakespeare says, beware of the Ides of March. The Ides of March. But March is a beautiful month. And for us Christians, that whole month is going to envelop what we call the climax of the Lenten season. From the 1st till the 31st, it's going to be a complete the sufferings, the death and resurrection of our Lord. A beautiful season, a beautiful month for us. Of course, our children, many of them have finished their exams, the others perhaps will do the last exams, and they will also be free. It's a beautiful month, I would say. And let me start with the scriptural sharing, the readings of this week, of this Sunday, which are once again very beautiful. The central theme is on the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verse 13 to 25, which speaks about Jesus cleansing the temple. It's a beautiful Gospel, I said, because we see the other side of Jesus. We have seen Jesus as the most merciful, compassionate, going out to the others. And here he is a stern master. It's something that someone has disturbed him so much that he does not stop using even what's called that stick with a rope to hit the people, to drive away people from there. And the occasion, of course, as you know, is because the temple or the outer court of the temple has been utilized for selling, for buying, perhaps a lot of noise, the buying and selling of money, coins, and then the sheep that are bought for the perhaps to offer sacrifice are kept there in big number, and the bleating of the sheep, and also the pigeons and all these things. And Jesus says that it is not proper to sell these things in the temple, and that is why he's very angry. And he tells them, of course his opponents come and challenge him and says, this has been going on for a long time. Who are you to stop it, and why do you want to stop it? And Jesus, filled with that spirit or love of God, he says that you destroy this temple, but within 3 days I will rebuild it. Of course, he was referring to his own body, but the Jews thought he was trying to destroy the temple. One word is enough for them to flare up, and they are almost seeking to do away with him. You know, the first reading is also beautiful because it's connected to the Gospel from Exodus chapter 20, verse 1 to 7. And there the Lord Yahweh tells about himself. I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods before you. Not only that, you will have no other idols before you. So this is the first commandment for us that has been expressed so well, and also the other commandments. Keep the name of the Lord holy, keep the Sabbath holy, have respect for the others, do not kill, do not commit adultery. And so all these are perhaps focused on one commandment, that you shall have no other gods but me. No other gods before me. And as I said, this connects the zeal of Jesus in order to destroy those things that are perhaps not worthy enough to be kept in the temple, to be thrown out and to be destroyed. The zeal of the God has enveloped him. And the third reading also, what we call from Corinthians chapter 1, 22 to 25, St. Paul gives us another view of God himself. This God, who is an eternal God, who is a zealous God. And Jesus shows that this God is the most important for us than anything else in the temple. But St. Paul gives the other side of God. How God is not one who shows off, who tries to glory and magnificence, but he speaks of the cross. Our God is one who embraces the cross. And so for St. Paul said, this is foolishness. This is first of all scandal for the Jews, because for the Jews to connect anything with the cross was to connect with the lowest or perhaps the least thing, and they avoided the cross. So therefore it's a scandal for them. And for the Greeks it is a foolishness. It's a foolishness. Greeks believed in success, in wisdom, in proficiency, in excellence, and therefore to go down to that level of the cross was foolishness for them. But then St. Paul very bravely says, we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews, but folly to the Gentiles. And so Jews demand signs and Greeks demand wisdom. But the wisdom for us is this, that our Jesus, who suffered, died, but rose again. The resurrection part once again places him as the God of our lives, and you shall have no other God before him, because he has even been successful to defeat not only evil but also death. What do we learn from this? I just sort of jotted 5 small points from the whole readings of today in order to help you in your meditation or reflection, or perhaps take home something for yourself. The first one is, Lent is a time of doing some spiritual cleaning. We are all used to cleaning our house. Maybe sometimes we do it once a year, once a month. Once a year, of course, we do a complete overhauling and cleaning of the things. So also our own houses, our own temples need cleaning, need cleansing. And therefore the Lenten season is a beautiful season to cleanse ourselves. And this gospel provides us enough matter to say that what are the things that we have to throw out. There are many things that we have to throw out from our houses, from our families, from our perhaps the workplace. Sometimes your table gets full of so many things. This is there, that is there, that is there. But then you have to sit and clean it up and say that this can be thrown away, this has to be sent somewhere. And that is the sort of spring cleaning, the spiritual cleaning that we can do in the Lenten season. Secondly, we also speak about the temple. And what is a temple? First of all, the temple is, perhaps some may say, the church, a spiritual structure where we will go to reflect upon the word, to pray to God. That's the temple. But, sometimes even holy places become boring places. Holy places become the normal places. In English, we have that expression, familiarity breeds contempt. There are some people perhaps who go again and again, and so the church loses its importance for them. Suppose a man comes from Saudi Arabia or one of these Gulf countries where there is absolutely no church, no worship. When he goes to the church here in India, it's as good as he goes with his hands joined, because church is something special. Temple is something special. So therefore, I think there is something called familiarity has crept into our practices of the church also. We say the rosary, lifeless. Someone shouting there, someone is one. We see the hymns. We think what you need is to add more music, more beats, more drums and more noise. Even the Eucharist, perhaps I even say, we priests and religious are also perhaps do not say the Eucharist, the sacraments well. At every altar in most of our parishes, especially the older parishes, you see the front of the altar. When we sit behind the chair, we can see the behind the altar, and there it's written beautifully, "Dear priest, celebrate this Mass as your first Mass. Celebrate this Mass as your last Mass. And celebrate this Mass as your only Mass." How beautiful. First Mass, how much unction and spirituality and devotion we have. But after that, slowly perhaps it creeps in and we just sort of utter or mutter some words and finish off. Celebrate it as the last Mass. If suppose I were in my deathbed and the doctor tells me another 6 hours, another 5 hours to live, and I ask for a table to celebrate the Mass, I would celebrate it. Celebrate it as the only Mass. Those who are going to, as I said, to some of the Gulf countries, perhaps China, Russia, the communist countries, there is no chance of celebrating Mass. Even secretly, they say, because if you are caught, you are just thrown away. And therefore, if it's the only Mass that you're going to celebrate, that's what I speak of the temple and the familiarity perhaps that spoils everything. And therefore, the temple. I also speak about what we call the temple of our own body. St. Paul says, your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. It needs cleansing. We have to throw away something from our head, something from our table, something from our mouth, something from our ears, something from my eyes, which I have to throw away. The temple is also perhaps what's called the domestic church, the family. The family is called the domestic church. Church it is called, the domestic church, which means it's a temple. And perhaps we parents, along with the children, we have to think in context of this gospel of the cleansing of the temple, that our family is also a temple, a domestic church. And what are the things that we don't need here? You don't carry your, let us say, your tiffin carrier to the church. It's not necessary. You eat at home and come. You don't take perhaps your mobiles and this and that and place it here, place it there. It's not necessary. So also in the family, the mother and the father to sit together and say that what are the things that are absolutely necessary in this family and perhaps what is not necessary. The nonsense chat that we do is not necessary. The mother has to be strict and say, we are all sitting on the table here, look at us, talk to us, keep that phone down, keep that phone out or put it off, because we have brought too many things. That's one. And so, cleansing of the temple. The thirdly, I say that ask Jesus to enter our home, our temple. Jesus needs to come once in a way. Unless, Martha and Mary, when Jesus was coming, perhaps they prepared it so well. The house was so much spick and span and everything was there. And Martha ran inside to bring something for Jesus and Mary was sitting at his feet. So also, we have to invite Jesus into our house. Perhaps Jesus will notice many things. Even though I have I have cleansed my house, Jesus may say, no, that corner there is something there. And you need to remove this old garland. You cut to this one. So we have to welcome Jesus into our life. First of all, into our churches. That Jesus is the one who proclaims. Jesus is the one who gives, rather he's part of the sacraments, the first communion of the children. It's only many of the families celebrate it only as a social celebration. We invite the guests. We want to take as many photos as possible. The girls and the boys are dressed like kings and queens. With that, it finishes. But if we are going to tell the child that receives the first communion that Jesus is coming into your heart, the sacrament of matrimony, the sacrament of confession, so much needed in the Lenten season. So therefore we invite Jesus into our house. Number fourth, I say that money cannot buy God. It's absolutely true. You can't buy God with money. Many of us think that maybe I can compensate my evil or perhaps even by putting money. I can put my name in the public domain by making so many charities. Perhaps even there are some people who would like to help and support the church so that their names are known. I don't know. You can't buy God with money. And so Jesus cleanses the temple of this money matters that are there. There are two different things. in my latest circular that I've asked the priests to bless the houses. To bless the house. It's a great opportunity for the pastor to go in search of his flock. Jesus, soon after his resurrection, what did he do? He went in search of his disciples, each one of them, and he didn't send a notice to say, all of you come and meet me here. No. Rather, he went to those places that they gathered. Peter and John and James were on the shore, they were fishing, and they had not caught, for Jesus went there. For to meet Thomas, Jesus goes once again to the assembly. So therefore, so also the pastor, I say that, goes in search of his people, goes and meets the people, and he speaks to them. And that is how perhaps he can also get a feel of the people, and therefore he can also say that to the people what is really God. And finally, I say that, St. Paul's beautiful reading of Corinthians speaks about wisdom and foolishness. And what we think is wisdom, for us wisdom is getting more and more degrees, writing more and more books, reading more and books, giving more and more lectures, is wisdom. But St. Paul seems to this foolishness, because the real wisdom is experiencing defeat, carrying the cross. And the cross itself burdensome, want to throw away. Imagine if Jesus at the way of the cross suddenly thought, this is too much for me, I don't want, I will use my miraculous powers to see that all of you are given punishments for punishing me, and I will throw this cross and go away. Our salvation history would not have been different, but Jesus carries the cross. So St. Paul says the cross has got wisdom. And the foolishness is to think that we can do without the cross. So that is why St. Paul also gives a beautiful message this way. I repeat once again. First of all, as I said, that Lent is a time of doing spiritual cleaning. Secondly, the significance of the temple, the holiness of the temple, our own churches, our own bodies which are temples of the Holy Spirit, and our own families which are the domestic churches which need to be cleansed. Thirdly, I say that Jesus needs to be invited into our house. Sometimes when the education inspector comes to the school, he notices certain things and points out, you have not done this, you have not done this. So also better that we call Jesus and say that, I think my house is perfect, but if you notice something more, surely we will be useful. Now, fourthly, I say that money cannot buy God. And that's why Jesus throws out those coins. And there are many things perhaps we also associate with God and godly things that we think money can buy. And finally, I have said that St. Paul's wisdom and foolishness. This wisdom is to carry the cross, to embrace the cross, and to profit from Jesus' own death on the cross, so that we can all be part of the resurrection. I wish you a good reflection, my dear brothers and sisters. The second point that perhaps is put before me is what's called the Pope's intention for the month of March. I don't have to repeat. Every month the Holy Father gives a particular intention to be prayed upon, so that every day of the month we think of this special intention of the Holy Father. Of course, it's also for the universal church. The Holy Father doesn't pray only for himself, though he does sometimes, but it's mostly the Holy Father praying for the church in the world. And so the intention this time is very, very special and very, very thoughtful. The Holy Father, Pope Francis, asks us to pray in this month for the martyrs of our day, who are witnesses to Christ. It's a beautiful theme. We have heard of the martyrs. We have read of the martyrs. Sometimes we read perhaps to give stories to our children. Saint Blessed Rani Maria, 25th of February. In fact, the Bishop of Indore had called me. Every year they celebrate this feast of Blessed Rani Maria. She went from Kerala, she was a nun, she went to the north, and there she was among the people, and especially fighting against the rights of the people, because the women were considered as throwaway objects. The men also were not paid properly. There was this caste difference. Everything was there, and she was fighting for them. And because of which she not only liberated many people, many got them courage. And so her enemies thought that the best way would be to eliminate her, and so they killed her. Fortunately, there's another story that is coming up, that her own assailant, the one who attacked and killed her, is not only transformed, because he was accepted as one of the family of Sister Rani Maria's family, and now he himself has become a sort of a preacher, rather a one who proclaims and says that not only I have done wrong, Christianity has got something to offer to the world, including forgiveness of those who have attacked, those who have murdered. Even for them there is forgiveness. So let me come back to the Pope's intention to say that to pray for the martyrs of today, the witnesses. The love of Christ. The Pope says we have to accept the love of Christ and accept to be faithful to the point of death. There will always be martyrs among us. We can't say that martyrdom is over. Even in our own country, there are many people who have died. We have spoken of the Kandamal martyrs about 10-15 years ago. Perhaps some martyrs also will be spoken of in the place called Manipur, who have died for faith. And there are so many other places where people are dying and giving their life for the God. So this is a sign that we are on the right path. The what we call the death of the martyrs is always seed for new faith, the blood of the martyrs. So therefore, there is always sign that the church is on the move. The church is increasing and improving because of the martyrs. A person who knows, Holy Father says very much in this sort of a small video that he gives for the month, for the intention of the month, for the Holy Father speaks about a non-Christian whose wife died for faith, because the enemies and the terrorists had come and asked her to give her a crucifix and said, throw it away, smash it. But she didn't. But then they slit her neck and she died. And so the Holy Father says, when we went to that particular place, I think Lestos, in an African country, and when he met, the husband of this lady came forward and said that I was a non-Christian. But then the sacrifice of my wife has converted me, has made me a different man today. So therefore, the blood of the martyrs keeps on giving us new crops, new shoots, as it were. The courage of the martyrs, the witness of the martyrs is a blessing for everybody. So therefore, the Holy Father says, let us pray for those who risk their lives for the gospel in various parts of the country, that we might imbue the church with courage and missionary drive. So therefore, the Holy Father says, be always open for the grace of martyrdom. I take now one of the Lenten practices, as you know, the 7 Lenten practices. I take the Lenten practice, what's called the spiritual reading. It's very simple. First of all, it's a reading. We read something. But not just novels, not just newspapers, not just perhaps economic conditions and the other historical parts, but the spiritual part, the spiritual reading. So these 40 days, perhaps, if we can make a habit to perhaps half an hour, just to spend the father, the family, the mother of the family, or both together reading to the children. It's called the spiritual reading that can nourish our soul. So therefore, Lent, as you know, is a time when we emphasize, first of all, awareness of our sins, awareness of our own sinfulness, and what separates us from God. So therefore, the spiritual readings help us to realize, because sometimes some things are very cloudy. Am I doing something, but I don't think it is wrong. I think it is okay. I think it can go on. But the spiritual reading as such gives us an insight to say that this is yes, this is no. And so it also helps us to know the utter dependence on God by guiding within, by finding within a source of sustenance beyond food. Man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from God. So therefore the spiritual reading, the first type of spiritual reading is the scripture reading itself. The scriptures are the best thing that we can read and perhaps we can absorb ourselves. And so this Bible reading. There are some parents who make the children also read. There's a children's Bible, perhaps not the whole of the Old Testament, but some stories. The Samaritan woman, Jesus speaking to the children, or perhaps what we call the prodigal son, the Good Samaritan. These are all stories. I saw a small Bible, children's Bible, which had got with a lot of pictures, so children can read. The elders also can read the Bible, and sometimes perhaps strong for some. There are so many things in the Lenten season. You can read about Jesus' own death and resurrection, the last part of all the Gospels, all the synoptic Gospels and the Gospel of John, that gives us readings on the suffering, death and resurrection of Jesus. There are some people who read the Psalms, and of these there are 7 penitential psalms, we call it, which call for mercy, which call for compassion. And psalms, as you know, were written by King David. And David wasn't such a saintly man. In fact, he had committed a very big sin. He had lusted after another woman, of a wife of a soldier, or perhaps wife of a citizen. And since he wanted to marry her by all means, he could do it only when that man died. And in order that he dies, he takes that man and puts him into the war in the front line so that he gets killed, and then he takes over his wife as his own wife. We can throw mud in people's eyes, but you can't throw mud in God's eyes. And so God realizes and sends the prophet Nathan to him. And the prophet says, he tells a beautiful parable. He says, there was a rich man and a poor man. A rich man had got so many what we call animals. They had the sheep, they had the goats, they had the cows, so much he had. And the poor man had just one little lamb or sheep. He used to take it in his own, he used to eat on the same table, sleep on the same bed, and that kid perhaps was so much attached to the master. And the prophet says, there was a guest who came in the rich man's house, and instead of killing one of his lambs in order to make a lunch or dinner for him, he took away the poor man's lamb. And the David becomes furious, and he said that man has to die. And the prophet tells him, you are the man. You are the man. You had such glory and wisdom. You had everything. That poor man had just one family, one wife, and you saw to it that that man died and you took the woman. And so these are spiritual readings which are very inspiring. I was speaking about Psalms. So there are 7 penitential Psalms which you can note down, which are very much useful for spiritual reading. Psalm 6, Psalm 32, Psalm 38, Psalm 51, Psalm 102, Psalm 130, Psalm 143. I read once again, Psalm 6, Psalm 32, 38, 51, 102, 130 and 143. So these 7 Psalms are also very useful. They express deep sorrow and also call us back for conversion, asking God for help and forgiveness. Of course, you can do other readings also. For example, read the lives of saints, the biographies of saints, the books on saints. And you see, the saints are the best models for us for spirituality, for spiritual virtues. The book on St. Ignatius, for example, how this man was so ambitious, but then he turned to God. St. Francis Xavier, our own patron, he was a very, very ambitious man, wanted to become the biggest and the most learned person. And fortunately, he had a companion with him who was very much senior. He considered him too old, and I am too young, I am full of dreams, this man is only old things. But the old man, Ignatius, goes on repeating a spiritual quotation which you must have read again and again. He tells St. Francis Xavier, what does it profit if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? And that's how he converts him. Therefore, life of saints. So, spiritual reading means reading something that nourishes your soul in the Lenten season. One little happening in our diocese or gathering in our diocese that happened last week. Normally we have meetings of the young, we have the women, men, the schools, the teachers. This time this meeting was of senior citizens. Senior citizens. We are on the move to start a senior citizens commissions. Of course, we have indicated some of the people to take it up, and soon perhaps a senior citizens commissions will be formed in our Archdiocese. We have already about 15 to 20 commissions for children, for Bible, for vocations, for health. So many things are there. And now to take up a small commission on the senior citizens. Perhaps someone may say, why? We all will get old. None of us will live forever. The ones who are young today, perhaps after some years they become middle-aged and they become old. And what we are told is the population of the senior citizens is increasing because people don't want to have children. People don't want to have many children because of the difficulties, and therefore the number of the young and the old is almost equal now. Soon perhaps the number of the old will be higher than those who are young. I was reading a paper day before yesterday about Japan. Japan has reached almost zero growth percent, which means there are as many deaths, as many births, rather the births are becoming less and less. So therefore the senior citizens, who are quite big in number in almost all our parishes, fortunately they are the ones who are keeping the church alive. They come for Mass, they come for different services, they come to give their services also. Perhaps it's one. But on the other hand, the attitude of the society is slightly dimming or going on the negative side, that the senior citizens are a waste. They are just a burden to us. I wish my grandfather could have gone to the old age home, and many of them are the old age homes. Their children are perhaps doing very, very well, but they can't help to keep them in their own houses because they have their needs. So they send them to the old age homes. And they sometimes, of course, many children come and see them, greet them and bring them gifts or perhaps make them happy, but many just don't come. And the old people are just staring at the wall, waiting for death. And so this particular gathering which we had, we have what we call Archdiocese level, a small commission established, of which Mrs. Belinda Lopez has been chosen to lead it and give it the direction and so on. And for this meeting there were representatives from 4 parishes of our Archdiocese, which means 4 parishes have already started this, what we call the senior citizens movement or club, whatever you want to see it. And along with their parish priest, with the help of their parish priest, they are also going. I encourage that every parish has got a senior citizens group which can come together, discuss about their own needs, also pass time with each other. At home it's very boring. The children and grandchildren perhaps don't talk much, but they can talk to each other when they come in groups like this. So once a month or perhaps once in a fortnight, bring them together. Of course, there will be a spiritual inputs here and there, but allow them to talk with each other, allow them to share with each other, to remember those old days, to remember those old occasions that they have done, and many of them have done good work. They have done much for the society, they have done much for the government, they have done much for the church, and therefore this kind of what we call the senior citizen units will help each other. So I request 4 parishes have started. I would say, I have told this group when I met them, next year you yourself can perhaps motivate the other parishes to start. And I said by next year I want 40 units in our Archdiocese to be established of the senior citizens group. 8th of March. It's a very, not only historical day, a very special day for our women. What we call the International Women's Day. You know, the women are so happy to gather. Some of them gather in processions, some of them gather in meetings, and it's a women only, or women's perhaps movement, or rather enthusiasm that is brought out on that day. I did a little of reading somewhere and saw that this Women's Day, International Women's Day, began in 1911. You know how it began? It began with the struggle of women. The struggle itself started in 1909, and in 1911 it reached the climax wherein they won a victory. And what was their protest about? It's very, I would say, very funny to hear it. They were protesting for bread. They were protesting for bread. You know, a woman protesting for bread. For what? For herself? Never. She is protesting for the sake of her children, for the sake of this one. And so those were the years of recession, because perhaps women did not. And so the women, the men, they said the men, they just sit at home and perhaps wait for the wife to cook. But wife can cook if there is something. If there is nothing, what will she do? And therefore all the women got together in sort of a protest, and out of this protest which they won, they said we will celebrate every year the Women's Day, the International Women's Day, which is kept up on the 8th of March every year. And not only that, it's not only about women, it's about organizing the groups, individuals worldwide, so that all can play a part in the community, at work, at home and beyond. And what can we do? First of all, you know, there is still that mentality back of our minds that men are more superior, women are inferior. So first of all, we have to arrive at this level of what's called the gender equality, that the men are not only equal to men, that the women are not only equal to men, perhaps sometimes even superior. And this has to begin from the family, from the father and the mother, to give respect to the children, not to make any distinction between them, to give the boys more sort of occasions to play and money to spend and to go about, and the girl is controlled. No, you cannot go, you cannot ask for clothes, you cannot ask for so much food because the boy needs it. We are already making a distinction. The girl already feels that why am I born as a girl now? Because my brother gets more attention. Let me go a little back. You know, when the woman is pregnant, perhaps the first delivery, second delivery, how many of us still perhaps say, let it be a boy child. Let it be a boy child. Sometimes the what we call the suffering and the torture from the family and the community for a boy child. The mother-in-law says that if you are not going to get a boy, don't enter our house. We don't want girls. Sometimes it looks very sort of contradiction that women themselves want boys more than the girls. A woman would have said, I am a woman, I would love a girl in my house. But many of the women themselves say that. So therefore the International Women's Day gives us a lot of thought and reflection, and also a reason to celebrate for our women. How many of us we have celebrated for our women? To say that, Mom, today you rest. We will see everything. We will do everything. Buy a gift for the mother, for the wife, for the woman of the house, for your sisters, and so many ways we can make them feel that they are special, and perhaps correct this imbalance that is there in the society, perhaps in the church also, and in the communities, in order to lift the status of the women. Someone may ask, what can we do? First of all, empower the women. Give the power give more power to the women. Secondly, recruiting, retaining and developing their talents. Women are very talented. I was told in this Gangayana Yatra, of course, some of the men scientists were important, but the real homework, the inside work was done by the women scientists. The women scientists. Just now, the IPL of women cricket is going on, and WPL, they call it women's, the competition that is going on is very nice. So therefore, in so many things we can see their talents, and then we can also give them decision making roles, not only secondary roles. Sometimes in the office, perhaps there are two executives, but the man executive is considered as more important, more decision making. Why not the woman? So decision making. Also, I say that we also have to create certain infrastructure for women in order to this one. The women perhaps needs a privacy. They need a certain facilities in the places of work, etc., which we have to do. Also, we speak of what we call helping the women and the girls to make informed decisions about their own life. It's not that we who dictate to them, you should do this, you should do this, but for their own life, they can be this one. And therefore, quality education and training. Don't reserve that best expenditure that you want, make education on the boys only. Perhaps the girls are also better investment for the future. And of course, you have that beautiful saying, you teach a man, he teaches another man. Chapter is closed. But you teach a woman, she teaches a generation, teaches the whole family. So therefore, the more you equip the women, the more you train and teach the women, perhaps they will be useful. And finally, the women are also have so many artistic talents and creative mind. Some of these musicians, when I see the women, they are so much focused. They have so much, these embroidery things, which I can't hold a needle, but beautifully they sew into a beautiful embroidery piece, as it were, the paintings, the arts. So we can also promote many things for women. On the 8th of March, I request all the parish priests of our Catholic churches to celebrate this day, either on that day or perhaps a day earlier or later. Make it a happy day for the women with a beautiful Eucharist and some other activity that will make them happy. I take you to the jewel of the Archdiocese. I have been speaking about the jewels in the Archdiocese, and many people have been telling me that they are quite happy with it because, there are certain things that are not obvious. We have to bring them out. If I have got a jewel which is kept in my cupboard, okay, it's there safe. But if I bring it and keep it on the table, everyone will admire it. Are such a beautiful jewel that you have. So therefore, many people have told me that, Bishop, it's good that you are bringing out certain jewels of the Archdiocese, which not that were not known, were not obvious for us. We took it for granted. So they could be our structures, our heritage places, our pilgrimage centers, our churches, our institutions. So many things are there. A jewel is not confined to one particular category. It's the whole category that is in the Archdiocese. So therefore, this time I'm going to speak of a jewel of our Archdiocese, and that jewel is Archbishop Emeritus Alphonsus Matthias. He is still living with us. He is almost 97 year old, and this year on the 5th of February, he celebrated the Diamond Jubilee of his episcopal consecration, which means he is a bishop now almost for the 60 years of his life. And therefore, besides on the 5th of the month, 5th of February, I was in the meetings with the CBCI bishops all over India, and we could not celebrate as a diocese, but the bishops brought Archbishop Matthias to the venue where the Mass was celebrated. He was brought in a wheelchair and we all greeted him. But then I thought this is not enough, and seeking the help and support of St. John's, I arranged one more Mass or celebration for him on the 29th of February, and to celebrate as an Archdiocese something that we are grateful to God for the person, for the jewel that God gave us for our Archdiocese and for whole of Karnataka, I would say the Church in India and abroad. You will be surprised to say that he is one of the oldest bishops in India as bishop. There is supposed to be another bishop who's perhaps 1 year older than him, but then Archbishop Matthias is one of the oldest bishops consecrated in India. And secondly, he's also one of the 5 or 6 bishops or the delegates that were present for the Second Vatican Council. 1964, it ended in 1964. The whole church was involved in this, what's called the Vatican Council, the renewal, which was started by Pope John the 23rd, Saint Pope John the 23rd. And very few bishops from India, perhaps 20-30 bishops from India attended that sessions, and from all over the world there were about 2,000 or 3,000 bishops sitting together. And in this group was Archbishop Alphonsus Matthias, sitting as a representative of the whole country. And now we are told is, of course, many of the bishops have died, many of those delegates were there died. There are just about 5 or 6 in the whole world, and one of them in the whole of Asia and India is Archbishop Emeritus Alphonsus Matthias. He hails from a place called Bangalore in Bangalore. And something interesting about Bangalore is this place is famous for jasmine. The smell, the scent of jasmine, the what we call the beautiful aroma of jasmine. When you bring 1 or 2 flowers and keep it here, the whole room, as it were, comes in a beautiful way as something that is acceptable for all of us. Therefore, this particular flower brings. Why am I saying that? Archbishop was born in a place called Bangalore, which is jasmine, which gives flavor to the whole country, and perhaps it gives the beautiful lingering odor, and that is Archbishop Alphonsus himself. He is like that jasmine that is spreading through his life and his presence, through his grace and through his perhaps a little smile or activity or interaction with us, this jasmine type of smell or odor all through Bangalore. He was born on 22nd June 1922. His parents were Diego Matthias and Filomena de Souza, and he was ordained a priest. He was sent all the way to Kandy, what's called the Papal Seminary, for training, and that time going to Kandy or Sri Lanka, Ceylon it was called, is as good as going to somewhere in Europe or America, crossing the shore. But then he did his studies there in the highest degree, as it were, and he was ordained a priest on 24th of August 1954 for the Diocese of Bangalore. And for 10 years he worked as an assistant, worked as an assistant priest, a secretary of the bishop, and in between also he did his studies in Rome of the highest canon law category with the highest grades that we call summa cum laude, they call it, and he did it in canon law. He also did what's called the jurisprudence, a special course that was to be done for the judges, for the legal luminaries of the church. In the course he has done, and he came back and he was secretary to the Bishop of Bangalore when he was elected as the Bishop of Chikmagalur, which was just formed that time. He is the first Bishop of Chikmagalur because the diocese was born with him. He was ordained as Bishop on 5th of February 1964 by James Robert Knox, the Pronuncio of India. So he was ordained ordained as priest on 24th of August 1954 and ordained as bishop on 5th February 1964. That means he was just 10 years a priest, and I was told that he was one of the youngest bishop in the world at the age of 35 or 36 to be made a bishop. And that is why he is now 60 years as bishop, one of the foremost bishops. And as I said, he participated in the Vatican Council, not only as an ordinary bishop, as one of the periti, we call it, periti experts, the experts. Actually, Father Adrian Mascarenhas has done a little study on this, on his participation in the Vatican Council, and he says that Archbishop Matthias made 4 major contributions in Latin in the council. And the fathers must have been surprised that a young bishop coming from India is not only speaking in Latin but making contributions to the church wisdom by his interventions. He was transferred from Chikmagalur to Bangalore as the Archbishop on 12th of September 1986. And so he was Archbishop of Bangalore for almost 12 years, and he has constructed so many churches, bought so many lands, presbyteries, institutions. There is no count of them. When I go to some of our churches, suddenly when I see that slab stone plaque there, I see Archbishop Matthias' name. And when I see the registers and records, so many lands that have been bought, so many institutions that have been bought. And so after 12 years, for reasons of ill health, Archbishop offered his resignation on 24th of March 1998. And ever since, he has been in St. John's Medical College. There is a room that has been allotted to him in a quarters called Vianney Home, where the priests are staying. And therefore, on the 29th of this month, we call the Archbishop for a Eucharist with us. He was all the time in the wheelchair, and there were about 115 people from the diocese, the fathers, the sisters, the religious, some of his family members, some of the doctors also, and we expressed our gratitude and felicitated him a little. We were also grateful for St. John's management, Father Yesudas, the new director, for giving us occasion to celebrate with our Archbishop the Diamond Jubilee of his consecration. As I said, he continues to be a shining jewel of the Archdiocese.
The Shepherd's Voice, which is being presented by our beloved Archbishop, Most Reverend Dr. Peter Machado, the Archbishop of Bangalore, who takes so much of interest and concern in order to bring the various topics, the contextual aspects, in order to inform, educate, and catechize all of us, the priests, the religious, and faithful of this vast archdiocese. And I'm sure you are enjoying this program, Shepherd's Voice, and I request each one of you to share with your other colleagues, friends, and family and relatives, near and dear ones, so that everyone in this archdiocese can be more closer to listen to the Archbishop on this Shepherd's Voice, the weekly feature. My dear friends, as I've always told, that this is a wonderful platform wherein we can connect to the shepherd of this archdiocese, wherein he brings in the interesting topics in order to increase our devotion and love towards God, and also to know the spiritual matters that concerns our faith. In a very special way, you are most welcome to ask your questions, queries, and you can send them to us at archdblr@gmail.com, and you will also see our mobile number in and through which you can connect with our media center, Ave Studios, and the Archdiocesan Communication Center. Please do write to us your feedback, your opinions. Thank you. Continue to watch and continue to share with others.